role of a sales leader is already tough. Now, when it comes to hiring, managing, coaching, and guiding salespeople, it's even more challenging. But why make this job worse or harder than it needs to be? Now, I'm not saying this job is a bad job. It's a fantastic role. However, if you don't have the guidance, it can be tough, and it can get worse and worse and worse over time. On today's episode, my friend, I would call him a friend, Frank Cespedes, is going to lay out how you can make sure you don't make this job that's challenging even more challenging. I promise you it's some good stuff. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist podcast here on TSC TV on YouTube. My name is Donald Kelly, the Sales Evangelist, and I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And on this episode, we have the one and only Frank Cespedes. He is with the amazing university. You probably have heard of him, Harvard University. He teaches management program there. He has a couple books that are out. You're going to hear about one of those books today. He also ran his own organization with some colleagues that became very successful, was able to sell that organization. He's on boards of different startups and different companies. So he brings a wealth of knowledge when it comes towards sales and strategy. He's going to teach us how, as sales leaders, we can ensure that we don't make a tough job tougher. You're going to really love this one. I want you to get your pens and paper out because you're going to walk away with some great insights. Frank, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate you.
Donald, my pleasure. Thank you for hosting me on the show.
Well, I bragged about you a little bit there in a teaser, and before we started, we jumped into this interview here. But Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Well, I mean, my background is not particularly exotic. I was a professor for 10 years at Harvard's Business School, made my way up the hierarchy. Then I left. With some others, we started a business. I ran it for about another 11 years, and we got lucky. I mean, if you like, I could spin this a different way, but the truth is it was dumb luck. We sold at the right time. Harvard called me back up. How'd you like to come back and teach? That's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. So, the professor and some real-world experience as well.
What was the business, if you don't mind me asking?
Professional services. We had software. It was so-called learning software, but this was sort of the late 90s, Donald. If I showed you the software today, you would say, wow, people paid you for that? And the truth was we really made our money not on the software, but on the services. In effect, it was a professional services business.
Well, wonderful, man. Congratulations on that. That sounds amazing. And I think this is why you are able to, those professors are the ones I enjoyed the most, by the way. The ones that they had the real world knowledge, they had the experience, the academia, and they knew how to guide the class. They knew how to guide us students and inspire us. You had stories. So,
beyond stories, I mean, look, if you're teaching Chaucer, that's one thing. You don't need real world experience of the Middle Ages, but business is a performance art. So I think it helps. There's no doubt that when I got back, I was a better professor.
Oh man, I can only imagine. I can't wait to be a fly on the wall in your class. So, that'll be great. Let's go ahead and dive into this. We're talking about hiring today. One of the topic of this episode is that don't make a tough job tougher. And when you're talking about sales leaders and those who are hiring managers and finding the right people and getting them on board, it's a challenge. But let's start talking about the challenge. What are some of the challenges inherently involved in the hiring process that you've seen?
Yeah, and that is a very good place to start because not enough people in the sales function and outside the sales function, I think, recognize this base reality. There are challenges in hiring salespeople that simply don't exist to the same extent in hiring in most other functions. I mean, for example, if you want to hire an engineer, you can go to a school, and it's a little bit like walking into a buffet. What are you interested in? Do you want electrical engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering? You can find people who majored in those subjects. The same is true if you're looking to hire someone in finance or accounting. People major in those subjects. Same is true for computer programmers. But of the nearly 5,000 colleges and universities in the United States, the last time I looked, which was about 2 years ago when I started writing this latest book, less than 200 even had a sales course, let alone a sales program. So this is a line of work where the vast majority of people start out knowing very, very little about what they're going to get paid for. And as a result, most of the learning in sales is whatever the company does. Again, another fact here that I think puts this in perspective. Companies, on average, spend 20% more per capita on training salespeople than they do in any other business function. They already spend a ton, and part of it is because of the way people start, not really having a background. But the other thing that's important is that most learning in sales is on-the-job learning. So those are the basic challenges, I think, that just don't exist to the same extent in most other business areas.
You're singing the music to my ears. I absolutely love that, and and we'll put a plug for the book as well as we talk about that. But I feel the average tenure of a business development rep is, I think, it's 18 months right now. And I think if you think it takes like a B2B sales rep maybe 4-6 months to, probably say 6 months to really get ramped. So we have somebody for a year really in a position that they're cooking with fire. Can I get my return on investment? If I can shave that down to 2 months and get them for 14 months, think about the difference that can be if I can and I imagine as deal sizes actually increase. I don't have data on that based on that person's tenure or experience. So it makes so much sense to be able to have that function and have that capability.
Yeah, I think you're looking at it the right way. The deal size may or may not be correlated with time on the job. That's going to depend on the business, the sales model. But you're exactly right. If you think about ramp-up time, which, by the way, has increased steadily in the last decade, and the reason is that it's harder to get access to customers. Sales is becoming a more data-intensive activity because customers have more information. That ramp-up time has increased, but you're thinking about it exactly the right way. If I can accelerate that time to ramp up to full productivity by 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, in most sales organizations, that's a huge productivity increase.
Huge.
And the pandemic has brought this home because whatever else the pandemic has done, it's demonstrated, usually painfully, the importance of cash. And in most businesses, the selling cycle is the biggest driver of cash in and cash out.
Oh, so good, man. Oh, man. Frank, I think we need to do multiple episodes with you on this different topic here. So, but let's go down into. So now we understand that parameter when it comes towards not making a tough job tougher, hiring these people now. How do we make that job not so tough?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a couple of things. First, what you want to do is minimize the biggest mistake that most companies do when it comes to sales hiring. Most companies rely solely on 1 or 2 unstructured interviews in deciding whether that candidate is a good fit for their company, that sales model, etc. Now, what I'm about to cite, Donald, is as close to an established fact as anything you will ever hear from a business school professor. This statement is supported by over 60 years of research that consistently shows the same results. And I want to emphasize consistently. The correlation between the ratings that people get in their interviews and their subsequent actual on-the-job performance tend to vary from about 0.1 to 0.4. In other words, even in the best of circumstances, it tends to be a bit lower than the 50-50 odds of flipping a coin. Now, I have many colleagues who are aware of that research, which is pretty darn definitive, and their advice to managers is therefore don't interview. Well, as someone who ran a business, I feel that's something that only someone who's never run a business can say seriously. Of course you interview.
Yeah.
People manage people. People hire people. Especially in sales, people have to work with people. But you must supplement those interviews. For example, in sales, an excellent idea is to get people beyond the sales function involved in the interviewing. They're the folks that have to deal with the consequences of the sales that are brought in: customer service, customer success, product, etc. So the first thing is, don't rely entirely on interviews. The second thing is, if you ask sales managers what's your major hiring criterion, across industries, by far the most commonly cited criterion is experience, previous experience. And the reasoning behind that is fallacious. The reasoning is that if I can hire for experience, then A, I don't have to spend that money on training and development. But that's fallacious. And the reason is it's false is that there is no such thing as performance in the abstract in business. In business, there's only performance at your company, selling your products in your market. And most companies have the experience of hiring someone who was the star, wherever it was, at Google or Oracle or whatever. Then they get to our firm and somehow they don't work out. Well, it's not as though those people suddenly got stupid or lost their capabilities. Sales is very context specific. Part of what makes any salesperson effective in most sales models is not only their skills and street smarts with customers, but the relationships they develop internally with other people in their firm. And when someone moves from company A to company B, they have to reconstruct all of that. Part of the job of the sales leader is, getting back to your earlier comment, help them accelerate that process, help them do it faster and better. And that leads to the third thing. And once I say this, it sounds obvious, but trust me, once upon a time, I had quite a bush here. But the most important thing in hiring is knowing what you're looking for. And when I say knowing what you're looking for, I don't mean these platitudes that you hear. Well, we want someone who's got fire in the belly or stuff like that. I mean, what are the important tasks in your sales model today, not yesterday, right? And usually that's a handful of things, and you should need to specify them. For example, if you're hiring for experience, what does that mean? Is it experience with the industry? How transferable is that? Is it experience? Think about inside sales models where people are now making, sometimes 15 to 30 calls an hour. That's a call every 2 minutes, right? Is it experience dealing with that kind of very fast tempo cadence? Is it experience with a given segment or cultural group? Those are very, very different things. And unless you can specify what you're looking for, you're going to wind up with that random walk, throwing a dart in the interviews, which is what the 60 plus years of research indicates.
Oh my goodness, there's so much power in that. So holy, where do we start? We're going to the second half of this interview now. Like, where do we hit and dissect? And I think let's go back to the part that I was cracking up on the most about the fact that if you're, go back to like the idea of throwing a dart. Like if you're hiring, that scale of how much people get it wrong when it comes towards what the interview says versus performance. I mean, what do I do? What do you tell people?
Well, I think I start with the fundamentals. Unapologetically, because one of the things that's always impressed me, both as a practitioner running a business for 11 years, I've written 60 cases. I've got my bona fides in research. I've been around, but I've always been impressed at how far doing the fundamentals better than your competitors can take you. Then that earns you the right to do any of the currently fancy stuff. I think there are two basic fundamentals here, Donald. The first is the most important thing about selling in any market at any time is the buyer and the buying process. Who buys, why, and how. So when I say understand what you're hiring for, that's where you start. How does the buying process in our market with our sales model work today? What is it that the salesperson needs to be really, really good at in the buying process that's relevant in our business? And what are the things where, if we're honest with each other, that person doesn't need to be excellent, they just need to be good enough. And you're hiring for those things that really make a difference, where they've got to be very, very good. So that's the first thing, is to begin with the buyer and understand the customer conversion dynamic in the business. So I would start right there.
So if I'm looking for that in a seller, how do I grasp that in that interview?
Yeah. Well, again, selling is about behaviors. It's not about how well they shine in the interview. It's not only about attitude. And at the end of the day, because it's about behaviors, you want to put in place assessments, internship type scenarios where you can actually judge that behavior. Now, when I say that to managers, what I often hear in response as pushback is, oh, I can't imagine hiring on an internship basis. We're in a war for talent, etc. Here's the data. Sales turnover in the United States annually varies from about 20 to 30%, right? 20 to 30%. It's higher when economic conditions are good and therefore talented people have more options. And obviously, think about a year ago in the pandemic, it's lower when the economic conditions are poor and, people are not going to leave their jobs. But on average, it varies 20 to 30%. Now, think about what that means. It means that for most companies, the equivalent of the entire sales force must be hired, trained, socialized every 3 to 5 years. That's what 20 to 30% turnover means. And 20 to 30% turnover also means that you can call it whatever you want. I call it an internship. I call it a period of time where we're evaluating this person's behavior, but that's what companies are doing anyway. They use different jargon, but that's what they do. Those are the people that after 6, 9, 12 months get fired. Why not be upfront about what those first 6 to 9 months are about?
Yeah.
Again, it's about behaviors. You start with understanding the buyer and then putting in place whatever you can do to judge the actual behaviors, not the smiles in the interview.
Oh man, I love the idea of understand the buyer, understand what you want, and then also going back to this idea of the internship, so to speak. I worked for a company. They did that exactly. They had a program that they partnered with the county with, and in this program, the county paid for my first 3 months with them.
Yeah.
It was a jobs hiring program that they had. I didn't know. The HR said, technically, you don't work for us. You work for this organization. I was like, what? I thought I just did an interview with you guys.
Yeah.
But it explained the process. But they took the company, used it as a training period. The company, they invested in me. They invested in training. They did the work. I became one of their top performing sellers.
Yeah.
And the other seller who made it 6 months, they paid for 3 months for him because they did the training and so forth, but he didn't catch. It didn't grasp. The roots didn't catch.
And I think what you're describing, the other benefit of that, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
You were able to also assess the company. Is this a place I want to be? What does it take to succeed here?
Yeah.
And anyone who interviews, no single person can tell you what it's like to work in the company. The other thing I would point out, and again, this is why a behavioral assessment is so important. When you look at the things that many sales leaders say they're looking for in a salesperson, if I'm perfectly blunt, if you take these things seriously, they're looking for, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Michael Jordan, someone like that. Now, my advice to any manager is whenever you can hire Michelangelo or Michael Jordan, do it. That's gonna be great. But there are very few Renaissance men and women out there. Now, this is where managers must manage. We have to understand, again, that buying process, what really makes a difference in what our salespeople do. And then secondly, we have other levers beyond hiring that we can use so that we don't need Renaissance men and women. You can use people like me, people that are okay, people that are not, particularly brilliant at it in the way we deploy the sales force, in the tasks that we're asking them to do and not do. And let me point out that the pandemic, I think, my own feeling, Donald, is a lot of these so-called new normal predictions you're hearing about during the pandemic, what's going to be a new normal. I think most of them are complete nonsense. They're basically straight line extrapolations of behavior during shutdown conditions, all right? But one of the things that I have seen in many, many companies that the pandemic is of necessity opened their eyes to, in effect, they've realized they were overpaying for many of the tasks in their sales model.
Interesting.
Particularly things like lead generation. Turns out we don't need really expensive salespeople doing that. We can do that with either less expensive people or, algorithms.
Yeah.
Demos. We don't always need that, $100,000, $200,000 rep doing the online demo and many, many meetings. Now that's the point. What you want to do is focus talent in the areas where it makes a difference. I think that's that realization and the change it's making in sales models and therefore hiring. I think that is something that's going to last even when we're all vaccinated.
Oh, so good, man. Loving all of this stuff, Frank. I'm absolutely just like over the moon and back with this. This is one episode that I'm going to go back through multiple times myself to listen to. And you now have been endeared to me as someone that will have multiple time on this podcast, if you're willing to come back. But Frank, if there's one major piece of advice you'd like someone listening to this episode who's a hiring manager or looking to hire a team, what's that one major piece of advice that you want to
Well, I mean, I think I've already mentioned a couple. Know what you're looking for. Start with the buying process. That's the important thing. In some sense, I'm saying don't be someone who stops at these platitudes about experience, etc. But the other thing I would point out is to, recognize that the hiring process doesn't end once we've hired someone. And the reason is for the things you mentioned, Donald, right toward the beginning of our conversation. The sooner I get somebody to ramp up their productivity, the better they are, the better I am. Right? If I'm a sales leader, I can then devote my attention to something else. So it's what we do after we hire someone, especially for a new person, a young person, because very typically they haven't had much training, if any, in selling. That should be thought of as part of the hiring process itself. That it just doesn't end once somebody, gets their badge and either comes into the office or stays home and makes their calls via Zoom.
So true, man. Oh, Frank, loving all of this. If folks listening out there want to get in touch with you, to learn from you, to hear about your book, you mind telling us about the book for a second?
You bet. I'm quite willing to tell you about a book. It's a new book. It's called Sales Management That Works, How to Sell in a World That Never Stops Changing. I have a website, frankcespedes.com, but you can get the book on Amazon. If you want to buy a couple of 100 copies for your team, you can get volume discounts from the publisher, Harvard Business Review Press. But I think if you go to Amazon and you'll see it there, you can get the electronic copy or the print copy. And Donald, thank you very, very much for giving me that opportunity for that sales pitch.
Oh, no, it's an absolute honor. And if folks want to get in touch with you, do they just go back to that same website?
Well, I think probably LinkedIn is the best way to do that.
All right. We'll put your LinkedIn profile down in the show notes. Frank, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today, sharing your wisdom. It meant a lot, and I thank you again for
My
doing
pleasure.
that.
Thank you.
That was the one and only Frank Cespedes, and if you haven't connected with him already, please go ahead and do so. We have his link and information down below. Check out some of the things that he has to offer. Check out his book. It is good. And if you haven't connected with him on LinkedIn, go ahead and find him there as well. Tell him you heard him on the Sales Evangelist podcast. I know he would appreciate that. And speaking about heard on the Sales Evangelist podcast, if you haven't connected with our sponsors, please go ahead and do so. They're giving away some amazing offers for people like you and me in our community. Check it out. Find all the details in the show notes. Find all the details down below. I want to help you. I want you to succeed. I want you to take advantage of the things that Frank is sharing here. Some of those great advice, and apply them to your business for your life, and to see greater increase in success. As always, I want you to go out and find more of those ideal customers. I want you to know what to say when you speak with them. I want you to know how to close more deals. But most importantly, I want you to challenge you to raise your level of thinking each and every single day, and go out and do big things. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoyed the content, I ask you to go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up at the bottom right-hand corner. Also, to make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. This way, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest sales strategies, latest tools, and things that are going to help you to not only find more prospects, but to close more deals. Thanks so much.